November 30th, 1939. Eastern Front. The snow had buried the land so deeply that even sound seemed afraid to travel. Every breath froze midair. Every movement risked death. Somewhere out there, hidden behind white silence and pine shadows, German snipers watched everything. They had rifles with precision scopes, steel confidence, and weeks of unchecked kills behind them. On this front, they ruled not with numbers, but with fear. Men stopped moving in daylight. Heads stayed low. A single careless step meant a bullet through the skull, and then there was him. He stood slightly apart from the others, tightening worn gloves around a rifle no one respected. No scope, no polished metal. An old bolt-action weapon captured from the enemy long ago, an enemy rifle, they called it. Some laughed quietly. Others shook their heads. Even his own comrades whispered doubts, wondering why command hadn't reassigned him or taken the weapon away. What good is that thing against German optics? Someone muttered, across the frozen stretch of death. German snipers noticed him too, or at least they noticed the rifle. Through their scopes it looked almost pitiful, an insult to modern war. A man bringing yesterday's weapon to tomorrow's battlefield. The cold gnawed at his fingers. The wind sliced his face raw. He said nothing. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply lay down in the snow, pressed his cheek against frozen metal, and waited. No one knew his name would soon be whispered with fear. No one guessed that arrogance had already made a fatal mistake, because in exactly 7 days, the laughter echoing across this frozen battlefield would be gone, replaced by silence, replaced by badas, one sniper at a time. They said the rifle was a liability among soldiers. Weapons were more than tools, they were status. A scoped rifle meant training, importance, trust. It meant command believed you were worth the equipment. And lying in the frozen trenches of the Eastern Front, men compared rifles the way others compared medals. Steel pride in a war that allowed very little dignity. His rifle had none of that pride. It was old, taken from a fallen enemy months earlier. Heavy wood stock, iron sights worn smooth by use. No markings that impressed anyone. No glass to magnify the world. To most men, it was a joke, something better left behind or handed to someone desperate, outdated, they whispered. Useless against German optics. Even officers looked away. On this battlefield, range and clarity were everything. German snipers with their scopes could see a man blink from hundreds of meters away. Technology ruled here. Or so everyone believed, but the man with the iron sights had grown up differently. Long before war had found him, he had learned to shoot without magnification, to judge distance by instinct, wind by the feel against his cheek, movement by patience rather than urgency. He did not rush his shots. He didn't believe in chasing targets, he believed in letting them come. The rifle fit him the way a tool should, not flashy, not admired, but trusted. Iron sights forced him to be closer, smarter, more precise. There was no glass to fog, no reflection to betray him in the snow. When others cursed frostbitten scopes and cracked lenses, his rifle remained silent and true. Mockery followed him anyway. Soldiers joked that he'd be dead by morning, that the enemy would spot him before he ever saw them. He never answered, because to him, the rifle was not old, it was honest, and soon, the battlefield would learn the difference between what looked weak and what truly was. By the second day, the Germans knew they were being hunted. Not by a unit, not by artillery, by a single presence they could not see. Each morning began the same way. The cold arrived first, clawing through wool and bone, turning breath into white ghosts that had to be swallowed back down. He lay motionless for hours, snow settling over his body until he blended into the earth itself. Muscles screamed to move. He did not. Hunger gnawed. He ignored it. Every sense narrowed into a quiet, patient focus, then a shape shifted. A shadow lingered too long. A scope glinted for half a second. One shot. Another German sniper fell without ever firing. By day 3. Bodies were being found in places that made no sense. Behind false cover. Inside reinforced nests. Positions thought impossible to reach. German command responded with discipline, at first sending their best counter-snipers. Men trained for this exact kind of duel, none of them came back. They tried decoys next. Helmets on sticks. Fake movements. Intentional noise. He watched it all without reaction, letting the snow erase his presence. He did not fire unless he was certain. Patience was his weapon. And patience does not miss. By day 4, the enemy began firing blindly, unloading rounds into empty snowfields, driven by nerves instead of logic. Artillery thundered where no one stood. The ground shook. He stayed still, waited, counted heartbeats between explosions, another shot. Another silence. Isolation pressed in on him. No voices, no reassurance. Just endless white and the knowledge that one mistake meant death. His fingers bled. His legs went numb. Still, he remained. By day 6, German snipers refused daylight positions. Some abandoned posts entirely. Fear had replaced confidence. They whispered about an invisible killer. A ghost in the snow. An old rifle carried by a man who could not be found. On the 7th day, the count reached 30-3. 33 elite snipers gone. The battlefield felt empty, now too quiet. The laughter that once mocked him had vanished, swallowed by dread. Somewhere behind enemy lines, a decision was being made. This could not continue. Because now, for the first time, the enemy was no longer hunting blindly. They were preparing to end him. The attack began without warning. One moment. The snowfield lay still. The next, the world exploded. Artillery shells tore into the ground he had used for days, turning frozen earth into fire and shrapnel. Snow rose in boiling clouds, erasing every landmark. The Germans had stopped guessing. They had calculated. Someone had finally studied the pattern of deaths and drawn a line straight to him. He moved for the first. Time and hours, explosive rounds cracked through the air, slamming into trees, splintering trunks as if they were made of paper. Bullets shredded the white silence from every direction. This was no duel anymore. This was extermination. He crawled, slow and deliberate despite the chaos, dragging his rifle through torn snow as debris rained down. Then came the blast that found him. The shock hit first an invisible fist slamming into his side. Pain followed a heartbeat later, white-hot and consuming. His body folded into itself. Warmth spread beneath his coat, shocking in the cold. He tasted metal and snow and something darker. Still, he did not scream. Around him, the barrage continued. Dozens of rounds poured into the area. Enemy snipers fired in coordinated waves, covering every possible escape route. His legend demanded nothing less. To them, he was no longer a man. He was a target that had to disappear. Minutes passed. Or seconds. Time lost meaning. His hands shook as he pressed himself deeper into the crater formed by the shell. Each breath burned. Each movement threatened blackout. Somewhere nearby, a German voice shouted a command. Close, too close. Then silence. The firing slowed. Then stopped entirely. Smoke drifted through the trees. Snow fell again, soft and uncaring. German units waited, watching. Listening for movement that never came. They did not retrieve a body. They simply marked the area and withdrew. Unsure if they had killed a ghost or wounded something far more dangerous, alone in the crater, bleeding and barely conscious, he held onto the rifle that had carried him. This far. The legend did not end that day, but it nearly did, and the battlefield, once again, fell quiet, unsure what still breathed beneath the snow. They carried him away before dawn. Wrapped in canvas stiff with ice and blood. No ceremony. No audience. Just exhausted hands pulling him back from the snow that had nearly claimed him. By the time the sun rose, his rifle was gone from the front end with it. The death stopped. The silence unsettled everyone. Weeks passed. The wound healed slowly, painfully. Shrapnel remained lodged too deep to remove. His body recovered unevenly, strength returned, but never fully. Some mornings, his hands trembled without warning. Other nights, sleep never came at all. When it did, it brought snowfields and motionless targets, faces he never saw clearly, Only felt. No one spoke much about what he'd done. Official reports reduced the week to numbers and verified kills. Names disappeared into margins. The enemy never admitted what happened, only that an entire sniper sector had gone quiet overnight. German units reassigned. Positions shifted. Tactics changed? Something unseen had shaken them, even if no one wanted to say it aloud. Among his own side, whispers spread and then faded. War moved forward. New battles demanded new stories. Legends, it turned out, were inconvenient things too difficult to explain, too unsettling to dwell on. It was easier to let them blur into paperwork. He did not protest. Fame had never been the point. Neither had hatred. What lingered instead was weight, the knowledge of every decision, every breath held, every moment where patience ended a life. Precision did not dull the cost. It sharpened it. Sometimes he thought of the rifle, of how something mocked and discarded had altered a battlefield. Other times he tried not to think at all. Outside the recovery tent, artillery thundered in the distance. The war had not paused for him. It never did. But somewhere along that frozen front, soldiers still walked a little more carefully. Scoped rifles scanned empty horizons with just a hint of doubt, because even though the rifle had fallen silent, no one was entirely sure the man behind it was truly gone. Years later, when war became ink on paper and photographs in archives, the story resurfaced quietly. Not as a speech, not as a celebration, but as a record, brief, clinical, undeniable. A stretch of days, a frozen front, 33 enemy snipers removed in a single week. No scope, no modern rifle. Just patience, terrain, and a man who understood silence better than most. The rifle that had once drawn laughter now sat behind glass, studied instead of mocked. Historians argued over it. Engineers debated why it worked. Soldiers leaned in close, not to admire the weapon itself, but to understand the discipline behind it. Technology aged quickly. Skill did not. The man remained difficult to find in the records. He never sought interviews, never corrected exaggerated rumors or borrowed glory. He returned to anonymity the way he had lived through victory quietly. To him, the week was not a legend. It was duty. And duties, once fulfilled, were meant to be put down. The lesson endured long after the rifles changed. Arrogance blinds. Overconfidence announces itself. And sometimes the deadliest advantage is being underestimated. Back where it began, the snow still falls. Wind still moves through trees the same way it did then. The silence remains familiar, heavy with possibility. Somewhere in that quiet laughter once echoed, short, careless, certain. It did not last. Because when mockery met resolve, resolve proved stronger. And long after the battlefield forgot the jokes. It remembered the silence that followed, cold, absolute, and earned.